Gopal Gurjarji, Honorable Minister of State for Social Justice and Empowerment, Shri Tarun Vijayji, Member of Parliament, Mr. Rajiv Ranjan Mishra, Joint Secretary in the Housing and Urban Poverty Alleviation Ministry, Mr. Rajiv Agarwal, Joint Secretary in the Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion, Mr. Rakesh Ranjan, Advisor Niti Aayog, Ms. Mehnaz Ansari, Country Representative of the USTDA, Mr. Manoj Agarwal, and distinguished participants in this event. As Ravi was mentioning, this is the fourth installment of this Smart City event, which elets has been organizing every year. But this is a very different event. And what distinguishes it from the first three, in between, on the 25th of June to be precise, the government has actually launched the Smart Cities program. And for starters, I think everyone was confused before the launch, that is, as to what is this smart cities and what does a smart city mean? What makes a city smart, and is it just a smart acronym or does it actually mean something? A lot of those questions were answered when the scheme was launched and the guidelines were released by the Prime Minister himself. And therefore, some of the basic contours of the scheme and what a smart city is and how it is defined for the purposes of this program have been answered. But the debate has now shifted to the next level, which is, given that these are the contours of the scheme, what will actually make the city smart in terms of technology, and what will actually, in what manner will technology get integrated into the various components of the city administration and management in order to make it smart. These are some of the questions which now are perhaps arising and which we need to think about. So in that context, I think that this event comes at a particularly handy moment, just about a month after the launch. And now, as per the details of the scheme which have been indicated, the competition has begun among all the states, and states have to select the cities which participate in the Smart City Challenge. And some of the states have already selected their cities. And in fact, yesterday, actually day before yesterday, I was at Gurgaon at the launch of the NASSCOM warehouse there, which is being done in partnership with the state government, where the Chief Minister and the Finance Minister were also there at the program. And the question was, why has Gurgaon not been made as one of the smart cities under this program? And the government, the Chief Minister announced that irrespective of the reasons for that, in Haryana, perhaps Karnal was the chosen city, he announced that the state would take up Gurgaon and make, if necessary, the contribution, the financial contributions required from the state government itself. So I think that most of the states have understood the importance and significance of this program, especially with regard to the urban centers which they are projecting as a hub, either for IT or some industrial activity or some as a major business center within the state. So once the cities participate in the challenge, they would actually need to prepare a proposal, and the proposal would have to take into account the extent of ICT usage which is already there, and then prepare certain plans for moving forward. So the intricacies of applying ICT in this context and where, as somebody said, uh, we all know that the urban management in India has a huge set of challenges, and it's quite obvious that the systems which are currently in place are not the most modern that you can think of. There has been significant progress in many of the urban areas in use of ICT in governance. For example, in the maintenance of property, property and taxes and things like that, in things like births and deaths, trade licenses. So a few of such areas of governance which involve permissions or registrations, etc. Many cities have already begun using it, and there are many solutions which are quite stable and available across the country. Some of them are even available on a cloud-based platform. But if you really look at the infrastructure, which is very much a part of what the city has to support, if you look at the way the water supply is provided, the way the power is provided, the way waste management is done, the way safety is ensured, then in all of these the use of technology today is still very, very minimal, barring a few exceptions. So that has not yet become a mainstream, the way ICT has in governance. So the question now is two things. Number one, quite apart from the governance bit where I think it has been sufficiently discussed, but nonetheless that is still a work in progress. What are the ways in which technology can be used in some of the other infrastructure sectors, number one. And number two, how do you actually integrate the infrastructure, how do you actually integrate the ICT into that infrastructure at this point, where it's, as somebody described it, a little bit like trying to convert a World War I aircraft into a modern jet fighter while it is still in flight, without the aircraft actually crashing in between. So how will we actually do all of that? And these are some of the questions which I thought I will briefly try and address in the course of this talk. So to help conceptualize and visualize all of these changes, what we had done is to get the best of minds and technology people in the industry. As you know, almost all of these solutions do come from various companies and private sector organizations which have actually done this in other parts of the world. And by putting and collating all of this expertise and experience, a framework was prepared which is a generic framework and a standards-based framework, which is an integrated ICT and geospatial technologies framework. This was done in collaboration with the ministry and then documented and made available, and it is available to all the states and urban local bodies, which really clarifies what the role of ICT could be in a smart city. Essentially, I've already mentioned that governance is something which is reasonably well understood now. I won't spend too much time on that. But apart from governance, it also now is time to look at physical infrastructure, social infrastructure, and the environment, and how technology can actually make a significant difference to create whatever is contained in the concept of a smart city. Again, these are really the governance impacts. We've seen what kind of solutions there are, what kind of technologies are in use, what kind of impact they are having. And I think it's important that a significant amount of progress has been made in this area, because that has now convinced all the urban administrators and the elected representatives of the power of technology. So now there is no need to sell the idea that technology can make a big difference. Now the question is, okay, how and what are the exact steps? So let's look at some of the newer areas and what technology can do. If you take something like water, Perhaps in a few areas, people are familiar with the fact that technology is being used in things like billing. And it might appear to some that this is what technology is. But actually it goes far, far, far beyond that. Billing is only the visible front end. I remember going to a hospital where all the front end was computerized and the billing and the registration was being done through ICT. This was quite a few years ago. But the moment you went beyond the registration or the payment, everything was being done in a business as usual way. So here also, if you want to really derive the power of technology, all the various elements, starting with the source of the water supply and the data analytics surrounding that, to the plant where the water gets treated, and the meters where the bulk supply is actually tracked, where you start from the top and then see how the water is getting used, to the way in which the water is actually supplied in terms of the mains and the pumping stations where the water is provided, and then going to the treatment plants and the individual housing and the meters, where today with these technology interventions, it is possible to actually track not only individually the consumption, but on a daily basis, and do away with the need for inspectors and people visiting the house and taking the reading and so on and so forth. So a lot of this not only gets automated, but brings in efficiency and analytics, which enables even the user to actually track their own usage. And once that happens and once that is made available, not only transparency increases and efficiency increases, but people become a little more responsible because that's the way in which they optimize their own usage. So these are some of the kinds of solutions which are there. I'll not go into the details because of want of time, but all of these details are available in terms of all the elements that are talked about here. The GIS-based asset mapping, predictive analysis, consolidated view, and the dashboard, which any one of you who has been the head of the municipality as a commissioner or as the CEO of an urban area know that if you could have a dashboard view, then how much easier it would be to monitor. But these are the elements which together will create that overall dashboard for the city. And the kind of impact that it would have makes a huge difference. And if we want people to be responsible urban citizens, then we have to also provide them with the tools and wherewithal, one, to build trust in the administration, and the second, to be able to exercise their choices more judiciously. Similar is the case with waste management, where again, this is one of the big bugbears in every urban area. And one might wonder what is the role of technology here. And ultimately, there is a point of view that all this technology is irrelevant. All you have to do is get the Safai Karmacharis to do their job, and this is taken care of. But how do you actually do that? How do you actually monitor that? How do you ensure that the contractors who move the waste, even after the Karmacharis have done their job, are actually doing it? How do you monitor whether the trucks are moving or not? How do you enable citizens to actually log in their complaints? And how do you enable citizens to report back whether it was addressed or not addressed? And how do you therefore bring in the element of citizen participation, without which effective governance would not be possible? All of that is absolutely essential and relevant in the context of waste management. And the chart here again indicates how right from the citizen level to the people who are working in the municipality to the disposal, these technologies can be used. Again, there are examples of in very isolated pockets where this is already being done. So this is not rocket science, number one. This is not something which is being done in New York or some other city overseas. So it is actually in use in parts of India. So I will just move forward. Similar areas with regard to safety, etc. are there. I will not go into details. I understand that the minister has to leave urgently. So I will leave the illustrations, but you get the general idea, I think, of how the different areas of urban management are done. But how does the government or the urban local body partner with the IT industry is one question. And as a body which brings together all the IT companies, I would only like to share with you that ultimately the SPV has to reach out and decide how the procurement of infrastructure will be done. And as infrastructure is procured through some public-private partnership, be it a BOT or a BOO or a BOOT or some other form of public-private partnership, how that ICT will be brought in, whether it will be brought in as a part of that infrastructure procurement or as a separate horizontal layer, those are questions which the SPV will have to work out. And the beauty of this is that once the IT layer is brought in, for that part of the city which is coming under the smart city project, the ICT part can readily be extended to the rest of the city without really too much of additional costs. So that solution need not then be redone. So the IT companies which have this knowledge and expertise, they can take up the turnkey implementation at the city level, that is across the board horizontally, or at the domain level in respect of each of the verticals that I talked about, or partner with the infrastructure providers and to integrate the ICT solutions in them, or partner with the infrastructure EPC contractors at a domain level. So this is where the detailed roadmap for the city is needed, and in which this report can actually help all of you. And we would recommend that you leverage your existing investments. And for those of you who need some information, or you want to get in touch with the people or organizations which provide these services, then we do have a point of contact which can help you with all the specific information that you might need in terms of which are the companies which are doing work in water, or which are the companies which are doing work in power, or how do you reach them, or who's the contact person within those companies. Such information that you might need, we have actually designated a nodal person within the organization to help you to respond to all these queries. So I'd like to thank elets for having given us this opportunity and for having invited me here to share these thoughts with you. And we look forward, as this very, very important program rolls forward, to work with all of you in making this dream a reality. Thank you.